Hi Class 2. Today we're going to have a look at some spellings, and we're going to concentrate on our common exception words, which in Class 2 we talk about those tricky words. Now, tricky words are tricky because you can't use your phonics to sound out the word to help you spell it. You have to learn how to spell it. So in Class 2, we use something called mnemonics to help us to spell those tricky words. And what that means is we make up silly sentences or silly phrases, and when we come to spell those tricky words in our writing, we say the silly sentence or the silly phrase, and it helps us to remember how to spell that word. Okay, so we're going to have a look at a few different tricky words together, and hopefully you will remember some of the silly sentences and phrases that we've used in class to help us spell them. So the first one is because. Now, when I write the word because in my writing, I would say big elephants can always understand small elephants. Okay, so my silly phrase or my silly sentence, I have a different word to help me remember each letter in the word because. So it was big elephants can always understand small elephants. Let's have a look at another one that we use a lot in year 2. Let's think about the word said. Now, a lot of times in your writing, you might write the word said like this. S-e-d. However, it's a tricky word, remember, so we can't use our phonics to sound it out like that. We have to use our silly sentences or our silly phrases. So what we say is, silly ants in dresses. Silly ants in dresses. This part of the word said is the really tricky part, isn't it? So if we use our mnemonic, our silly phrase to help us, then when we spell the word said in our writing, we should hopefully get it right. Silly ants in dresses. Now, I like the word silly, and we use it in another one of our tricky words. Our other tricky word that we would use the word silly in is the word was. Now, quite often, I see you write the word was like this. Was. However, it's a tricky word, remember, so we can't just use our phonics to sound it out. Instead, what we would say is, worms are silly. Worms are silly. The word was, this sound is an ah, so we have to try and think of a way to remember that. So if we say worms are silly, then that will help us remember how to spell the word was. So we've talked about the word because, and we've talked about the word said and the word was. Now, these next 3 words are also ones that we find really tricky. We've got the word would, could, and should. Now, I've chosen those 3 words because if you look really carefully, the end part of the word has all of the same letters in, an O-U-L-D. It's only the beginning of each of these words that is actually different. So when we come to write the word would, could, or should in our spellings, if we can think of one silly phrase or one silly sentence, then all we need to do is keep that silly sentence for the 3 words, but just change the word at the beginning. So I've had a try and thought, why don't we just use these words within our silly sentence? So we could say, would old uncle like dancing? Could old uncle like dancing? Should old uncles like dancing? Why don't you have a try at home to see if you can think of a really good silly sentence or silly phrase to help you remember those 3 tricky words: would, could, and should. And I'll see you soon.